The capsule opened with a hiss that echoed through the observation chamber. White vapor spilled out across the sterile floor, and for a moment, everything fell silent. Then came the sound, a desperate, rattling gasp as lungs that hadn't drawn breath in 8 centuries suddenly remembered how. Dr. Lyrae stood perfectly still, her luminescent silver skin casting a soft glow in the dim chamber. Her 4 eyes, 2 where humans kept theirs, and 2 smaller ones near her temples, watched the woman in the capsule with clinical detachment, or what she told herself was clinical detachment. The human's fingers twitched, then her eyes opened. "David?" The word came out cracked, barely audible. "David, is that you?" Lyrae stepped closer, her movements fluid in a way that unnerved most humans when they first saw her species. The Thenari had no bones, only a sophisticated network of energy channels that held their form. To human eyes, they appeared to glide rather than walk. "My name is Dr. Lyrae. You're in Medical Station Kepler 7. You're safe." She kept her voice gentle, modulated to what her psychozeonology training suggested would be soothing to human ears. The woman, Emma Reeves, according to the file, tried to sit up, failed, tried again. "Where's David? He was supposed to be here when I woke up. That was the agreement." Emma's eyes darted around the chamber, taking in the curved walls embedded with glowing panels, the equipment that looked nothing like what she would have remembered. This isn't NASA. This isn't the revival facility in Colorado. Lyrae had delivered difficult news before. Death notifications were part of working in long-term cryogenic recovery. But something about the hope in Emma's eyes made her hesitate. "Mrs. Reeves, I need you to focus on my voice. Can you do that?" "Miss Reeves, we never—" She stopped. Her hand went to her ring finger, found the band still there. "Where is my husband?" "What year do you believe it is?" "Don't—" Emma's voice gained strength. "Don't do that thing where you ease into bad news with questions. I'm a scientist. I was a mission specialist for NASA. Just tell me." Lyrae's secondary eyes blinked, a Thenari gesture that indicated respect. "It's the year 3004. You've been in cryogenic suspension for 847 years. The color drained from Emma's face. "That's not possible. The contract was for 50 years, maximum, just until they found a treatment for David's condition." "Earth's medical infrastructure collapsed in 2301. The facility you were stored in was abandoned. You were recovered from a derelict station floating in what used to be Earth's orbit. Earth itself is no longer habitable. The remaining human population lives in colony stations scattered across this sector." Emma said nothing. Her chest rose and fell, faster now. "Your husband—" Lyrae checked the file on her neural interface, though she already knew what it would say. "There's no record of anyone else being frozen with you. The capsule logs show you entered suspension alone." "No." Emma shook her head. "No, that's wrong. David was supposed to be frozen after me, as soon as the treatments failed. He had maybe 2 months. He wouldn't have just—" He promised. Lyrae had learned, in her 70 years of practicing medicine across 3 different species, that humans clung to promises with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Her own people had evolved past such attachments. They made agreements, fulfilled contracts, but the emotional weight humans gave to spoken words always puzzled her. "I'm sorry," Lyrae said, and meant it in the abstract way she understood sorrow. "The records from that era are fragmented. Many were lost." Emma closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her cheek. Such a strange biological response, Lyrae thought. Thenari had no tear ducts. When they experienced distress, their skin dimmed slightly. Clean, efficient. This seemed messy. "How bad is it?" the damage from the freezing. Finally, medicine. Facts. Diagnosis. This Lyrae understood. Your cellular structure held remarkably well, better than 93% of long-term cryogenic patients I've treated. But your neural tissue, she pulled up a holographic display, showing Emma's brain scan. The ice crystal caused synaptic degradation. Your memories are intact, but the pathways to access them are damaged. English, please. You're forgetting, slowly, and you'll continue to forget unless we repair the damage. Emma stared at the brain scan, her scientific training apparently kicking in despite the shock. What's the procedure? Neural pathway reconstruction. I'll need to access your memories directly, map them, then rebuild the damaged connections. It's delicate work. It will take several sessions. Will I remember David? The question cut through Lyrae's professional composure, not because of its content, but because of the way Emma asked it, as if nothing else in the universe mattered. That's my priority, Lyrae said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. The first session began 3 days later, after Emma had been cleared for the neural interface. Lyrae had prepared the memory chamber, a small room where the equipment could safely connect patient and physician at the synaptic level. This will feel strange, Lyrae explained, attaching the neural sensors to Emma's temples. You won't lose consciousness, but you'll experience your memories as if they're happening now. I'll be there with you, observing. Try not to be alarmed by my presence in your recollections. You're going to be inside my head? In a manner of speaking, I'll perceive what you perceived, feel what you felt. It's the only way to accurately map the neural pathways. Lyrae attached her own sensors, ignoring the slight flutter in her energy channels. She'd done this procedure hundreds of times. This would be no different. She activated the connection. The world exploded into color. Lyrae had interfaced with human memories before, but never like this. Most of her patients had been elderly, their recollections faded and abstract. Emma's memories hit her with the force of a solar flare. She was standing, no, Emma was standing, in a cafeteria. Harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of bad coffee, and recycled air. Someone bumped into Emma from behind, sending her tablet clattering to the floor. "Sorry, I'm so sorry," a male voice said. Emma turned, and Lyrae saw him through Emma's eyes. David Reeves. Tall, glasses slightly askew, wearing a NASA jumpsuit with coffee stains on the sleeve. Brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled apologetically. "It's fine. Really. I'm David. I just transferred from the propulsion team." He bent down to help gather the scattered papers, and when his hand brushed Emma's, Lyrae felt it, a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with actual voltage. This was attraction, human attraction. Lyrae had studied it academically, but experiencing it from the inside was entirely different. Emma said, "Mission planning." "I know. Everyone knows who you are. You designed the trajectory for the Mars supply run." "That was a team effort." "You're being modest. I read your paper on gravity assist optimization. Brilliant work." The memory rickled, skipped forward. Now they were walking together through a corridor, David talking with his hands the way humans did when excited. "So you're telling me that you think we could cut the journey time by 40%? If we time the launch window perfectly and use Jupiter's gravity well more efficiently, yes, but I'd need someone who actually understands orbital mechanics to check my math." "Flattery will get you everywhere, David." He stopped walking. The corridor was empty, just the hum of life support systems in the background. "Is it working?" "Is what working?" "The flattery. Because I've been trying to figure out how to ask you to dinner for 3 weeks now." Lyrae felt Emma's heart rate spike. felt the warmth spreading through her chest. This was what humans called butterflies, wasn't it? Yes, it's working. The memory dissolved. Lyrae disconnected, breathing hard, even though Thenari respiratory systems didn't work the way human lungs did. Her energy channels felt disrupted, chaotic. Emma's eyes opened slowly. That was the day we met. September 14th, 21:55. Your memory of that day is intact. The emotional encoding is particularly strong. That's the day my life started. Everything before David was just preparation. I said nothing. I was still processing what she'd experienced. The Thenari had evolved beyond pair bonding thousands of years ago. They reproduced through controlled energy exchange, selected partners based on genetic compatibility algorithms. What she had just felt, that rush of connection, that sense of finding something precious, her species had deleted from their evolution because it was inefficient. For the first time in her life, Lyrae wondered if efficiency was overrated. The sessions continued over the following weeks. Each one took Lyrae deeper into Emma's memories. And with each session, she felt herself changing in ways she couldn't quite name. She experienced their first kiss. Awkward, both of them laughing because David's glasses got in the way. She felt the terror and joy of Emma's pregnancy test coming back positive, then the devastating miscarriage 6 weeks later. She lived through their wedding in a small chapel in Colorado, David's hands shaking as he slid the ring onto Emma's finger. "I promise," he'd said, "to love you when we're young and when we're old, when we're on Earth and when we're among the stars, in sickness and in health, literally, because one of us will probably get space flu on the Mars mission." Emma had laughed through her tears. "You're supposed to be romantic." "I am being romantic. I'm promising to love you through the boring parts and the scary parts, the parts no one writes poems about." Lyrae disconnected from that memory, feeling like she'd been hollowed out. The Nari didn't make promises like that. They made contracts with termination clauses and performance metrics. Between sessions, Lyrae found herself thinking about David in ways that disturbed her. She'd memorized the curve of his smile, the way his voice dropped when he said Emma's name. She caught herself wondering what his hand would feel like in hers. Not in Emma's, but in hers. This was illogical. David had been dead for over 800 years. He existed only in synaptic patterns, electrical ghosts in Emma's failing neural network. And yet, the 7th session brought them to the diagnosis. Lyrae braced herself, but nothing could have prepared her for the memory of David sitting in the oncologist's office, Emma's hand gripped tight in his. Prion disease, similar to Creutzfeldt-Jakob, but more aggressive. We've seen a few cases in the astronaut population, something about exposure to cosmic radiation during the Mars missions. Treatment options? David's voice stayed steady, but Lyrae felt Emma's tarot beneath the calm surface. There aren't any, not yet. Research is ongoing, but the doctor's face said everything his words didn't. "How long?" Emma asked. 6 months. Maybe 8, if we're lucky. The memories skipped forward. Emma apparently couldn't bear to remember the drive home. They were in their apartment now, Earth's moon visible through the window. David was cooking dinner, moving through the kitchen like nothing had changed. "I want you to do something for me," he said, not looking at Emma. "Anything. I want you to get frozen." Emma stood up so fast her chair toppled. "What?" "The cryogenic trials. NASA's been looking for volunteers. If you freeze now, while you're still healthy, you can wake up when they've found a cure for this. Wake up and keep living." "I'm not leaving you." "Emma." David finally turned to face her. Lyrae saw the tears on his cheeks through Emma's eyes and felt them as if they were her own. "I'm going to die. That's decided. But you don't have to. Please, please let me save you." We could both freeze. Wait it out together. My condition is already progressing. By the time the paperwork clears, I'll be symptomatic. They won't accept me. He crossed the kitchen, took Emma's face in his hands. I need to know you're going to survive this. I need that, Emma. Please. The memory was fracturing now, Emma's emotion too intense for clean recall. Lyrae caught fragments. Arguments, tears, desperate lovemaking, more arguments, finally, resignation. The last clear memory was Emma in the cryogenic facility, lying in the capsule, David's face above her, trying to smile. 50 years. That's all. By then they'll have fixed this, and we'll both wake up. I'll be frozen next month. I promise. When you open your eyes, I'll be right there. You promise? I promise. I love you, Emma Reeves. I love you more than stars. More than stars, Emma whispered. The lid closed. David's face disappeared. Lyrae disconnected violently, nearly ripping the sensors from her head. She was shaking. Thenari didn't shake. Their energy channels were too controlled. But she was shaking. Emma was crying in the chair, silent tears streaming down her face. He lied to me. He was never going to freeze himself. He knew they wouldn't accept him once the symptoms started. He lied so I would survive. He loved you. The words came out before Lyrae could stop them. I felt it. What he felt for you was... She had no word in her language. Thenari had 14 words for different types of contractual obligation, but none for what she'd just experienced. Then why does it hurt so much? Emma asked. Lyrae had no answer. She was beginning to understand why her species had evolved past this. Love was agony. Love was beautiful and terrible, and it hurt like nothing she'd ever known. And she was falling into it, 8 centuries too late, with a ghost. The problem revealed itself in Session 9. Lyrae was running diagnostics on Emma's neural pathways when she noticed the degradation pattern. Every memory she accessed, every pathway she mapped and rebuilt, showed slight deterioration in the original. She ran the analysis 3 times, hoping her readings were wrong. They weren't. The technology was flawed. Not dangerously so. Her repairs were holding. But the act of accessing the memories to map them was eroding the original neural patterns, slowly, gradually, like making a photocopy of a photocopy. Lyrae did the calculations. At the current rate, by the time she finished repairing all of Emma's neural damage, the original memories would be degraded by approximately 73%. Not gone entirely, but faded, distant. Like remembering a dream rather than a life. Emma would forget the details, the sound of David's voice, the feel of his hands, the precise way he smiled when she said something clever. She would forget David, piece by piece, as Lyrae saved her. Lyrae sat alone in her quarters that night, staring at nothing. Her people didn't agonize over decisions. They ran probability matrices and chose the optimal outcome. But the optimal outcome here was unacceptable. Option 1, continue the treatment. Emma survives with full neural function, but loses the memories that defined her existence. Option 2, stop the treatment. Emma keeps her memories, but continues to deteriorate until the neural damage becomes irreversible. Option 3, Lyrae pulled up the memory files she'd been archiving. Technically, she was only supposed to keep them for diagnostic purposes, then delete them to maintain patient privacy. But she'd kept every session, every memory. She could, theoretically, return them to Emma after the treatment, re-implant the degraded memories using her archived copies. But that was illegal, unethical, Memory implantation without consent was considered one of the highest violations in Thenari medical law, and there was no guarantee Emma's brain would accept memories that had been filtered through Lyrae's neural interface. Lyrae opened the file from Session 7. David's face appeared in holographic projection, smiling at Emma on their wedding day. She'd watched this memory 17 times now, not for diagnostic purposes, just to see him, to hear him say those words about loving through the boring and scary parts. She was in love with a dead man, a human man who had never existed in her timeline, whose voice she knew only through another woman's memories, a man who had loved Emma with such totality that he lied to save her. What would David want if he could somehow know that the woman he'd sacrificed everything for was about to lose him all over again? Lyrae closed the file. She knew what she had to do, the ethical thing, the right thing. She would tell Emma the truth and let her choose.
Keep going. Lyrae stared at Emma. They were in the memory chamber, preparing for Session 12. You don't understand what I'm telling you. You'll forget him. Not all at once, but enough that I understand perfectly. I'm a neuroscientist, remember? Or I was, 800 years ago. Emma's jaw set with determination. If I don't continue treatment, I'll die. Brain death within 6 months, according to your scans. Yes, but then the choice is simple. Live without him or die and lose him anyway. Emma looked at Lyrae with an expression that made Lyrae's energy channels constrict. At least if I live, some part of me will remember, even if it's just the feeling of having been loved. There might be another way, Lyrae said carefully. I've kept archives of your memories, all of them. After treatment, I could... No. Emma's response was immediate, fierce. Don't you dare. Those are his memories of me, not mine of him. If I'm going to lose David, I'm going to lose him honestly, not with some recycled version filtered through someone else's neural interface. But please, Lyrae. She reached out, took Lyrae's hand, the first time they'd had physical contact outside the medical procedures. Lyrae froze. What do you mean? I'm not stupid. I see the way you look at the memory projections, the way you watch the sessions replay when you think I'm not paying attention. Emma's voice was gentle, understanding. You've fallen in love with him, haven't you? With David. Lyrae should deny it, maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she said, how is that possible? He's not real. He's just electrical patterns, neural firing sequences. Love doesn't care about logic. If it did, David and I would never have worked. We were terrible on paper. Different departments, different backgrounds. I was all math and precision. He was intuition and guesses. But somehow we fit. I don't understand what I'm feeling. I admitted, my species we don't do this. We don't form attachments that hurt. Then maybe you're evolving. She squeezed her hand. Before we start today's session, I need you to do something for me. What? Tell me about him. Everything you've seen. Every memory. I want to hear David's story from someone who isn't me. Someone who knew him objectively. I can't be objective about him anymore. Good. Then tell me subjectively. Tell me about the man you fell in love with from my memories. So Lyrae did.
She told Emma about the way David had proposed, not with a ring, but with a hand-drawn map of the stars, with their names written beside 2 adjacent constellations. She described the memory of him staying up all night when Emma was sick with pneumonia, reading terrible jokes from the internet to make her laugh. The time he'd burned dinner so badly, the smoke alarm went off, and they'd ended up eating cereal on the floor, giggling like children. He had this thing he'd do, Lyrae said. When you were stressed about a mission briefing, he'd put his hand on your shoulder and squeeze 3 times. Once for I, twice for love, 3 for you. You never mentioned it, but I felt it every time. This silent communication. Emma's eyes were wet. I'd forgotten that. The 3 squeezes. God, I'd completely forgotten. He sang off key, terribly, but he'd sing to you anyway while cooking. Old songs from the 2080s that no one else remembered, and you'd pretend to be annoyed, but you loved it. More Than This by Roxy Music. That was his favorite. He talked to plants. Your apartment had this little herb garden by the window, and he'd narrate what he was doing to the basil plants. Okay, Mr. Basil, time for your drink. Don't tell Mrs. Thyme, but you're my favorite. Emma laughed, a sound halfway between joy and grief. How do you remember these things better than I do? Because I experienced them without the burden of living them. I saw them as precious moments, not just everyday life. I saw David the way someone sees a shooting star, knowing it's already gone, so every second matters. Tell me more, please. So Lyrae did. She talked for hours, pulling out every memory she'd archived, the big moments and the microscopic ones, the way David's eyes tracked Emma across a room, the unconscious habit he had of reaching for her hand when he was nervous, how he'd leave notes in her lunch bag with terrible puns and drawings of stick figure astronauts. He loved you, Lyrae finally said, in a way that made me understand why humans write poetry and songs and stories, why you go to war for each other, why you make impossible promises and keep them even when it costs you everything. She paused. He loved you the way I wish my species still knew how to love. Emma was silent. Then she said, "Thank you for giving him back to me, even if it's just for today." Are you ready to continue the treatment? Yes, but Lyrae, after this is done, after I've forgotten the details, will you keep the memories? Not to give them back to me, but to just keep them safe. That's not standard. Please. Someone should remember him completely. Someone should know the full truth of what we were, even if it's not me. Lyrae thought about her small quarters, about the holographic projections she watched when she couldn't sleep, about carrying David Reeves in her neural archives for the rest of her life, this man she'd never met, who'd never know she existed. I'll remember him, she promised, every moment. They began the session. The treatment took 4 more months, 12 additional sessions, each one chipping away at Emma's memories while rebuilding her neural pathways. Lyrae watched David fade from Emma's mind like a photograph left in sunlight. First, the small things went. His off-key singing, the 3 squeeze code, the terrible jokes. Then, larger pieces. Their wedding day became fuzzy, details missing. Their first kiss survived, but Emma couldn't remember what they'd talked about afterward. By the final session, Emma could recall David's face only in abstract terms. She knew she'd loved him, knew she'd been married, but the specifics eluded her like trying to grasp water. Was he tall? Emma asked one day. Lyrae pulled up a hologram from the archives. David standing in their apartment, backlit by Earth's moon. Tall enough, she said quietly. He looks kind. He was. He was kind and funny and brilliant and infuriating and brave. Lyrae dismissed the hologram before she started crying. Vanari weren't supposed to cry, but she'd been learning how. He loved you more than anyone has ever loved anything. I wish I could remember that. I remember it for you. The final neural reconstruction took 6 hours. When it was done, Emma's brain scans showed complete recovery. The pathways were rebuilt, stronger than before. She would live a full, healthy life. She just wouldn't remember why she'd been frozen in the first place. "All done?" Lyrae said, removing the sensors. "How do you feel?" "Strange. Like I've woken up from a very long dream." Emma touched her wedding ring, still on her finger. "I know this means something, someone important, but it's like trying to remember a book I read as a child. I know I loved it, but I can't recall the story." "That's normal, after extensive neural reconstruction." "Will it come back? The memories?" Lyrae should say no, should explain that the degradation was permanent, that this was the price of survival. Instead, she heard herself say, "Some things last forever, even when we can't remember them. They shape who we are." Emma nodded slowly, accepting this. She looked around the memory chamber, as if seeing it for the first time. "Have I been difficult as a patient?" "No. You've been—" She searched for the word. "Remarkable." "Thank you for saving me, Dr. Lyrae." "You're welcome." But Lyrae didn't feel like she had saved anyone. She felt like she had committed theft, stolen a love story, and hidden it in her neural archives where its rightful owner could never find it.
6 months passed. Emma moved into her own quarters in the residential sector of Kepler 7. She found work with the colony's agricultural department, her scientific background still intact, even if her personal history was gone. Lyrae watched her from a distance, told herself she was just monitoring a former patient's adjustment, knew she was lying. She watched Emma make friends with other humans in the colony, watched her laugh at jokes and take up painting and learn to navigate this new world 800 years displaced from her birth. Watched her live. It should have been enough. Emma was healthy, functional, building a new life. The treatment had been successful by every medical metric. So why did Lyrae feel like she'd failed? She spent her nights in her quarters reviewing the archived memories. She'd watched them so many times now that she'd memorized every inflection, every gesture. She knew David Reeves better than she'd known anyone in her 70 years of existence. She knew the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, knew that he bit his lower lip when concentrating on calculations, knew that his favorite color was the specific shade of blue that Emma's eyes turned in candlelight. She was in love with a ghost, and she was haunting herself with his memory. It was on one of these nights, watching the wedding memory for perhaps the 100th time, that her door chimed. Emma stood in the corridor outside, looking uncertain. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," Emma said. "I know it's unprofessional to visit your doctor's quarters, but Can I come in?" Lyrae quickly dismissed the holographic projection. "Of course." Emma entered, taking in the sparse room. Lyrae didn't accumulate possessions the way humans did. Lyrae's quarters contained a sleep pod, a workstation, and nothing else. No art, no photographs, no evidence of a life lived outside of medicine. "I keep having this dream. I'm in a corridor. A man is walking beside me, talking about gravity wells and Jupiter. I can't see his face, but I know him. I know him better than I've ever known anyone in my 70 years of existence." Lyrae's energy channels constricted. Dreams after neural reconstruction are common, the brain processing repairs. "It's not just a dream. I know it's a memory, something real that happened to me." Emma turned to face Lyrae directly. "I need to know something, and I need you to be honest. Did I ask you to hide my memories? Is that why I can't remember?" "No. You asked me not to return them artificially. You wanted—" She struggled with the words. "You wanted to lose them honestly."
Lose what? Someone you loved. Someone who loved you. Lyrae pulled up the holographic projection again before she could stop herself. David's face materialized between them, frozen in that moment before the cryogenic capsule closed. His name was David. He was your husband. Emma stared at the projection. Her hand went to her wedding ring, turning it slowly. Tell me about him. Emma, please. I know you have the memories. I know you've been keeping them. Tell me who he was. So Lyrae told her. Everything. The first meeting, the first kiss, the wedding, the diagnosis, and the final promise. She spoke for hours while Emma sat silent, tears streaming down her face for reasons she couldn't fully understand. He lied to me, Emma finally said, about freezing himself. He lied to save you, and I've forgotten him. After everything he sacrificed, I've forgotten his face. Not entirely, Lyrae said, quietly. You remember the feeling, the shape of love even if the details are gone. That's something. Emma looked at the hologram again. David's face forever frozen at 34 years old, forever caught in that moment of saying goodbye. Would you show me more? Just once. Just so I know what I had. Lyrae knew this was a terrible idea, knew it would only hurt Emma more, but she couldn't refuse. She pulled up memory after memory, the apartment with the herb garden, the wedding in Colorado, the night of the miscarriage, David holding Emma while she cried, the conversation about cryogenic freezing. All of it. Emma watched in silence, and when it was over, she said, I understand now why you fell in love with him. Lyrae startled. How did you... The way you describe these memories, the way you can't stop watching them, you loved him through my eyes. Emma's voice held no judgment. I'm not angry. I'm glad someone remembers him completely, glad that somewhere he still exists in full detail. I'm sorry, Lyrae said. It's inappropriate. He was yours, and Love doesn't work that way. It's not property. It's not something you can own or steal. Emma stood, moving toward the door, then stopped. Thank you for keeping him alive, even if I can't. Emma, wait. Emma turned back. If you want, I could not return the memories, but I could tell you about him, about who you were together. Not as a doctor, just as someone who knew your story. Why would you do that? Because love stories deserve to be told, even when they end badly. Especially then. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'd like that. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Whenever you're ready. After Emma left, Lyrae stood alone in her quarters, David's holographic face still hovering in the air. She reached out, her hand passing through the projection, intangible, always. I'll keep you safe, to the ghost she whispered. I promise. It was a promise she knew she'd keep, a promise that would haunt her for the rest of her long Thenari life. But some burdens were worth carrying. Some loves were worth remembering, even when they weren't yours to remember. 3 weeks later, Emma came back. Then again the week after that. It became a ritual. Once a week, Emma would visit Lyrae's quarters, and Lyrae would tell her about David. Not just the big moments now, but the mundane ones. The way he organized the kitchen cabinets with labels in his terrible handwriting. How he'd stolen Emma's coffee cup one morning, and she'd found it 3 days later in the lab, still half full. The argument they'd had about whether to get a cat. Emma won, but the cat ended up loving David more. Emma listened to it all, building a portrait of a life she'd lived but couldn't remember. Sometimes she'd ask questions, sometimes she'd just sit silent, tears running down her face. Does it hurt? Emma asked one evening, carrying someone else's love. Yes, Lyrae admitted, but I think all love hurts. That seems to be the point. My people learned to love without pain, Emma said. We evolved past it. But watching your memories, I wonder if we lost something essential in the process. Maybe pain is the price of meaning. Lyrae pulled up a memory she'd been saving, Emma and David's last night before the cryogenic procedure. They'd gone to the roof of their apartment building, brought a bottle of wine and a telescope. David had pointed out constellations, making up ridiculous stories about the stars. "That one there," he'd said, pointing to a random cluster, "that's the constellation of the extremely lost astronaut. Got separated from his ship, now he's just floating around asking for directions." Emma had laughed. "That's not a real constellation." "It is now. We're naming it. When you wake up in 50 years, you'll look up and remember this moment." "More than stars," Emma had said. "More than stars," David echoed. The memory ended. Emma and Lyrae sat in silence. "I wish I could have loved him," Lyrae finally said. "Not through your memories, but really. I wish I could have known what it felt like to have someone look at me the way he looked at you." Maybe you will. 800 years from now, maybe you'll wake up someone from cryogenic sleep and they'll have memories of someone who looked at them the way David looked at me. That's a long time to wait. Love is worth waiting for. Emma stood to leave, then paused. "Lyrae, I know I don't remember David. Not really. But I remember this. These nights, you telling me his story. Maybe that's a different kind of love. Not the love of living something, but the love of preserving it, keeping it sacred." Lyrae felt her energy channels pulse with something that might have been hope. "Do you really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what David did, lying to save me, was for nothing. He wanted me to live even if it meant living without him." Emma reached across the small space between them and took Lyrae's hand. The touch was warm, solid, real. "I'm not him," Lyrae said quietly. "No, you're not." Emma smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Lyrae's carefully controlled form shimmer. "You're someone who learned to love despite evolution trying to delete it from your species. Someone who carries 800 years of someone else's memories because they're too precious to let die. That's remarkable, Lyrae. It's illogical. The best things usually are." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma said, "I've been thinking about getting an apartment closer to the medical sector. The commute from residential is exhausting." "There are several units available on level 7, Lyrae offered, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Are you on level 7? "Yes." "Then maybe I'll look there." Emma stood, moving toward the door. "Same time next week?" "I'll be here." Emma paused at the threshold. "Lyrae, I know I don't remember David, not really, but I remember this. These nights, you telling me his story. Maybe that's a different kind of love. Not the love of living something, but the love of preserving it, keeping it sacred." After she left, Lyrae pulled up David's hologram one more time, but this time she also pulled up a recording from earlier that evening. Emma's face as she listened to the stories, the way she laughed at David's terrible jokes, the tears that meant she was feeling something even if she couldn't remember why. Maybe this was enough. Maybe love didn't have to be lived firsthand to matter. Maybe preserving it, witnessing it, carrying it forward, maybe that was its own kind of love. Lyrae saved the recording alongside David's memories. Two people she'd never exist alongside, but who had taught her what her species had forgotten, that pain and beauty were inseparable, that love was worth the ache of carrying it. She dimmed her quarters lights and settled into her sleep pod, David's voice echoing in her memory. "I promise to love you through the boring parts and the scary parts, the parts no one writes poems about." Tomorrow, Emma would come back, and the day after that, and the day after that. It wasn't the love story David and Emma had written, but it was a love story, nonetheless. One about remembering, about preserving what mattered, about three people connected across impossible distances of time and death and memory. In the darkness of her quarters, Lyrae whispered to the ghosts she carried, "More than stars." 20 years later, Emma stood in Lyrae's quarters, no longer just Lyrae's, but theirs. The walls now held photographs, Emma's paintings of Earth as she imagined it from stories, holographic frames cycling through images of the station's gardens where Emma worked, and yes, one small image of David, young and smiling, forever 34. "I'm heading to the greenhouse," Emma called. "Wanna come?" Lyrae emerged from the back room, her luminescent skin casting its familiar glow. 20 years, and Emma still found it beautiful. "Let me finish these case notes." Emma crossed the room and did something that had become ritual. She placed her hand on Lyrae's shoulder and squeezed 3 times. Lyrae's energy channels pulsed with warmth. The first time Emma had done that, 18 years ago, she'd claimed it just felt right. She didn't remember why, but Lyrae did. "I love you, too," Lyrae said. "I know." She kissed her temple, right where Lyrae's secondary eyes watched the world. "Don't work too late. I'm making dinner." "You're going to burn it." "Probably. We'll order from the commissary." After Emma left, Lyrae sat for a moment with her case notes forgotten. She'd thought about David sometimes, wondered what he would think of this outcome. His wife, alive and thriving, in a future he couldn't imagine. His memories safe in the neural archives of an alien doctor who'd learned to love through his example. And Emma, not the Emma who'd loved David, but the Emma who'd been built from those ashes, who'd learned to love again differently, who'd chosen to stay when Lyrae had been certain she'd leave. It wasn't the ending anyone had planned. David had promised Emma 50 years, and even her eternity. Emma had promised to remember, and had forgotten. Lyrae had promised to remain detached, and had fallen in love with a ghost, then a person, then a life. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. Lyrae pulled up the wedding memory one last time. Not David and Emma's, but the small ceremony she and Emma had held 5 years ago. Nothing elaborate, just a few friends from the station, a magistrate, and promises made without lies. "I promise," Emma had said, "to love you in ways I don't remember, but somehow still know. To learn you the way someone once learned me. To be patient with your evolution. I promise," Lyrae had said, "to carry all of us forward. The you that was, the you that is, and the love that connects them. To remember when you can't." They'd sealed it not with rings, Emma still wore David's, but with the 3-squeeze code that Emma had reinvented without knowing its history. Lyrae closed the memory file and returned to her work. In the distance, she could hear Emma singing in the greenhouse, off-key and terrible and perfect. Some love stories ended. Some were preserved. Some were transformed into something new. This one, somehow, was all 3. And that was more than enough. That was more than stars.